Hey yo, we put free money where the mic is. He got it on lock like Rikers. Green rebates get you paid, so a lot of people like us. Money Talks Podcast, watch it on all your devices. Woo!
Episode 2 of the Money Talks Podcast. Adam, CEO of Fund Canna. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
How's MJ Biz going for you so far?
Great. Yeah, I mean, we're one day in. Energy's pretty good. Crowd is always great here.
Right.
I'm happy to be here.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we're happy to have you. I did some research on you. I want to know more about your story. So tell me about your childhood. I want to know all the trauma, the worst thing that ever. No, as a kid, what was life growing up for you? Did you always know you wanted to be kind of involved in the cannabis space? I know back then, obviously, wasn't legalized.
Yeah, I didn't know. My father was a user of cannabis when I was a little kid. So I always knew that like my dad's cigarettes smelled funny. But that's all I knew about cannabis. Right. But what I'll tell you, and that's true.
Yeah.
But what I'll tell you, I didn't have any, even in my adult life, I didn't plan to get into cannabis. I've always been interested, intrigued, but really as a kid, I was a numbers guy. Even before I knew what that meant, I thought in numbers. And it was hard for me to relate to people. Because I was always calculating and doing math in my head, and So
am I like a math equation to you? Do you see me as like a...
I don't see other people as math equations, but I do think I'm more comfortable with numbers than I am with letters and words.
Interesting.
And as a kid, I was aware of that. So I always had in my head somewhere, this is probably what I'll do, and is something with numbers.
Right.
And it's just funny that life worked out that I've been around numbers my entire career. I've been a lender for over 20 years outside of cannabis.
Interesting.
I just love using math to solve problems.
Right.
I know it sounds ridiculous. I don't think of myself as a nerd, but I think I might be a nerd.
No, I'm with you. Sometimes in my spare time, I'll just do like Algebra 2 problems. I miss like showing my work and getting to a solution.
Yeah.
Math was always my favorite subject. So were you like a math wizard, calculus as a 14-year-old? Like what were you like in high school?
So it's funny. I always, my teachers always wanted me to show work and I couldn't. I would get the right answer, but I didn't know how to show it because I just knew how to think it, and that was discouraging. But I still loved to do it anyway.
Yeah.
But ironically, where I didn't do well was the complicated, like statistics, great, but calculus, algebra, geometry, not my strong suit. Like math.
Yeah.
Like true math.
Right.
I love.
Like math that's actually applicable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I always found that. I always would ask the question, like, why are we doing this? I was that like annoying practical kid where I'm like, what's the point of this? I don't know how I'll use it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Like Steve Carell in the movie The Big Short, the guy who's always asking why. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
Oh, well, so yes. And to this day, like my wife tells me almost daily that I'm annoying because I always ask the WH questions.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it?
Right.
Who's responsible or accountable for this? So I'm like an 8-year-old child. Even in the office, I'm that way.
Yeah.
Why is my first question all the time. So it's funny you bring that up.
Has that helped you professionally, like that curiosity?
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, I think it's helped me again, other people will tell you it's just annoying. But in my head, it's helped me everywhere. The curiosity is, I have a desire to understand, like even people, not just things. I want to know how things work and why they work the way they do, and is there a better way? Like, how might I do it better?
Right.
But even with people, like my desire is to understand, even if I disagree, I have a very strong desire to understand why they feel like they do.
Right.
So I'm hunting for that ability to relate.
Right.
And professionally, if I can understand what the issues are that any industry is dealing with, I can understand how I might try to solve. I want to be a fixer. I don't know that I always am a fixer, but it's just, that's the drive.
Right.
Is to be a fixer.
Well, let's talk about your professional career then. Where did you go to college, and did you, like whatever you studied, what you studied in college, is that what you ended up practicing? Because most people don't.
No, and I love the question. So what I'll say is everybody that I knew was studying business. And in my thinking, again, I'll say I'm often different, right? I'm like Larry David. I'm well-intentioned, but I don't really fit in.
It doesn't deliver very well.
Yeah, it doesn't always land right.
Yeah, exactly.
But I didn't want to study business because my thinking was that's what I'm going to do my entire life. So let me study something else that might give me an edge over the masses. So I studied communication. I debated. I wanted to learn what are the best techniques for listening. What's the best approach to have your point of view not only heard but understood.
Right.
Because if I learned that, then I would apply it to business and maybe be a more effective business person.
Interesting.
And I already knew I was strong at math, so I still took some math classes, but my focus was really on communication.
Interesting.
And I went to school, to answer your question, University of Maryland, College Park.
Did you know that the creator of Sesame Street went to University of Maryland?
Jim Henson.
Jim Henson.
Yeah,
Is there like a statue of Ernie, Oscar the Grouch there?
There might be one actually of Kermit the Frog.
Really?
Yeah, because he created the Muppets. He created Jim Henson. Ironically, Larry David actually went to Maryland as well.
Really?
And so did one of the Google guys, whether it was Sergey Brin or the other guy. But anyway.
It's a fun fact.
Yeah.
So you're studying communications, but you want to be in business. How did you learn business then?
So when I graduated, first I went to an insurance company, and that was not for me.
Right.
And I realized that very quickly.
Is that for anyone? Like, who is passionate?
There are people that are, and I don't want to insult anybody. It's for some people.
Right.
I just know it's not
Shout
for
out to
me.
the insurance people.
Yeah, exactly.
There are people who love what they do.
It was a life insurance company and a financial planning business, and it was not for me.
Got it.
But so I went into the apparel business, believe it or not, women's clothing.
Wow.
Of all things. But what drew me to that was I could learn a lot of things. I could learn manufacturing, I could learn design, I could learn distribution, warehousing, and sales. And then the financial aspect of all of that.
Yeah.
So that's what drew me. I know it's weird because I'm in my early 20s, but I wanted to enter something where I could learn like a wide swath of a lot of things, and then I could figure out how to use it. So that's what I did. I worked in all the different areas. I excelled most at sales. I like the idea of, again, it's the communication in me, right? Debating. The idea of someone comes in and you're at large scale. I was selling to large department stores. I ended up then running sales for that company and then left and went to Wall Street.
No way.
Yeah.
So how old are you when you go to Wall Street, and what's that transition like?
I was in my mid-20s, and there what I loved was I missed interacting with people, but I loved the analysis of patterns and charts, and the numbers talk to you, and then you make decisions based on that. But I wasn't interacting as much with people.
Got it.
So then after that I left, and that's when I went into lending. Because I figured I could take what I learned about sales and marketing and distribution, and what I learned about identifying patterns and trends and analysis, and merge them together, and that's when I went into lending, and I went into consumer lending.
Got it. And then how do you transition into the cannabis space, and how long have you been in cannabis?
So from consumer lending, I went into commercial lending, and I did commercial lending, business lending, non-cannabis. I did that for 14 years.
Got it.
And I started a company in about 2008, during the financial crisis.
Oh, wow.
So I also have a tendency, and I don't know if this is a good thing or not, but I have a tendency when there is chaos or crisis, I gravitate toward rather than away.
Yes.
So when crowds are running away from something, I'm the guy that's running toward it.
More opportunity there.
That's exactly it. And as I said, I like to be a fixer.
Right.
So during the financial crisis, I had been in student loans, consumer lending, and all the banks cut me off. And at that point, I had already done about $14 billion in lending on balance sheet. And I figured if the banks weren't going to lend to me,
Yeah.
who was going to lend to small business?
Right.
So I ran towards small business and started lending to them. For 14 years I did that, and I put out about $3.5 billion.
Wow.
I underwrote 1 million businesses and funded over 100,000.
100,000 businesses.
100,000 different
you gave
businesses.
like startup funding.
Gave them money, not startup.
Uh-huh.
Like my thinking was, it's really hard to size an opportunity for a business that doesn't exist yet.
Right.
But if they're already operating, then I can make sure that I'm not over leveraging them.
Got it.
And as a lender, I don't want to over leverage for 2 reasons. First, and I mean this in order, I don't want to hurt the business.
Right.
And if you don't know what their cash flow in and out looks like, you might over lever them and therefore hurt them.
Right.
And then the second is, if you over lever, you're probably not going to be repaid.
Totally.
And so, so I've never figured out how to fund with debt
Gotcha.
a startup.
Gotcha.
I think equity is the right tool for startup, and debt is the right tool to fuel growth and ongoing operations.
Okay.
And I subscribe to that myself. So even this is the 3rd company I've started, Fund Canna.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that transition.
Totally.
But I've always used equity and debt for myself, and I subscribe to that in dialogue with clients. But the transition away from traditional or non-cannabis into cannabis during COVID, I had at the time about 120 million that was owed to me by
that's a
over
lot.
4,000 businesses.
Jesus.
And all of them were forced to close.
Oh no.
And I was forced to work from home, and I had 230 employees, all of whom were not allowed to come to work. And I'm at home, and CNN ran a story that showed dispensaries operating, open and operating.
Yeah.
And cannabis was deemed essential. And I said, wait a second. Cannabis, in my mind, cannabis is illegal federally,
Yeah.
yet it's essential, and legal businesses are non-essential and forced to close.
It's crazy.
So I started researching cannabis and how the industry. Now, I mean, I'm a user of cannabis, but I didn't really understand the industry. So I studied it, and I started. The deeper I went, I became more and more intrigued by how the industry was financed, how it ran, how it was banked,
Right.
and the disparity between states and the Fed. So after studying for a year, I studied for a year.
Wow.
I even got on planes and flew around and visited everything from cultivators through dispensaries, even some ancillary providers.
Yeah. What does studying look like? Like, what did that year?
So
entail?
like I went to a grower, a cultivator in Washington State. I toured the facility. I looked at like not only the grow operation, nutrients, HVAC, what the grow rooms look like, lighting, racks. And I asked them a million questions, just like you talked about.
Yeah.
They're like the WH questions, the annoying 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Right?
But they
So,
like answering though. People like having
some. Once
Okay.
they trust you.
Gotcha.
If they don't trust you, they don't want to answer. Why is this stranger, this lunatic, asking me questions? He says he's a finance guy, a numbers guy, but he wants to understand how my irrigation works,
Right.
how the drip of the nutrients work, what my
Right.
light cycles look like, what my utility bills are. But what I tried to explain was, I want to understand the disparity between cash outlay and then inflow of revenue.
Right.
And I want to try to design a product that bridges that. Once there was an element of trust, then they opened up. And so and even packaging for a cultivator, if they're vertically integrated, they have to buy glass jars, lids, labels, and then all the equipment that takes the flower and packages right into these, even screws the lids on and puts the label. And so after everything's been tested.
Right.
So I learned that, and then even visited a couple labs, went to dispensaries. I wanted to understand inventory. How do you stock inventory? How do you know what to buy? POS systems. Again, the deeper I went, the more interested I became.
Yeah.
And the more I realized that there wasn't really a very good debt solution for this industry.
Wow.
And so at the time that I was looking, there were about 400 banks servicing the space. There are currently about 850 banks that service the space. This was 4 years ago.
Jesus.
And so, but there are 12 to 15,000 banks that service non-cannabis.
Yeah.
So
That disparity is insane.
So I figured, all right, there are about 5% of banks service the space. At the time, how many of them are servicing with loans, debt? And the answer was really none. A few of them, 5 to 10, would finance real estate, but they wouldn't finance inventory. They wouldn't finance cash flow. They weren't providing revolving debt, like the revolving credit.
Right.
And all industry relies on debt. All industry.
Yeah.
I mean, I say this all the time, but because they're the biggest. Apple and Google, they sit on piles of cash. They still borrow.
Yeah.
And the reason that is using other people's money to service your operations, to service growth, to buy inventory, to service manufacturing. It's the way the world works.
Right.
This industry didn't have that. So it was my goal, the objective, to found Fund Canna and design product that could provide that infusion of capital, unlock the supply chain with debt. And so that's what I set out to do.
Wow. So how many people have you funded in cannabis so far?
So we've underwritten just under 4,000 clients.
Wow.
And we've funded about somewhere between 1,700 and 1,800 clients.
Wow.
Yeah, and we've approved somewhere between $320 and $350 million. But the way the financing works, it can be drawn and repaid anytime. So that I look at approvals more than I used to in other industries, because this industry needs that elasticity of draw, pay back, and only pay for time used as a way to bridge. The way it worked prior is either COD or net 30. But the revenue cycle, at least by my studying, is about 4.5 months across the entire supply chain. So you might have retail's a little different, but between cultivation and retail and everything in between, from cash outlay to revenue is about 4.5 months.
Wow.
But the average terms are 0 to 30 days.
Yeah.
That's a broken system.
Yeah.
So what we do is we create this, we lay out the money on behalf of our clients, or we give them the money.
Right.
They pay their bills, and then they can pay us out over time. But because they are only paying for time used, as the revenue comes in, they pay us down. And I find that works a lot better. So give or take, let's call it about $350 million of approvals, of which about half has been drawn.
Got it.
And that's where we are as of today, as I sit here.
And these companies that you work with are already off the ground because you don't invest in companies that have no revenue, have no proof.
Correct,
of
because
success.
if we think about it, it's not that I don't want to. So I'm an entrepreneur myself.
Yeah.
It's not, and it's my third time that I'm building a business.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't want to support young or new entrepreneurs or new enterprise. It's that I don't know how to underwrite them effectively.
Right.
I haven't figured that out. So I can effectively underwrite an operating business and know that I'm not over leveraging them. I'm not going to be a burden on their operation. I'm going to give them money that unlocks the company, fuels their growth. So our average client has grown by over 50%.
Wow.
And the reason that is just because without us, they're hamstrung.
Yeah.
They have to lay out money and then wait for revenue.
Yeah.
You can't grow when you lay out all the money you have and then you wait for revenue. You feel like a hamster on a wheel.
Right.
So if we can free up that cash flow and mirror the cycle, you grow. You can take more orders. You can fill the shelves with more product. You can buy more lights and more racks and add more square footage to your grow. And so we see the growth. I don't know how to fuel that in someone that only has an idea.
Right.
And so that's where I think equity plays better than debt.
And how often are you being pitched? Like, is it a...
Well, so it's not like we've got a team of salespeople and a team of underwriters, and we're speaking to hundreds of people every month.
Wow.
And at this point, right, when we first started out, there were like 2 of us, and we spoke to 2 clients, and funded both of them, and you know, it was pretty rocky and pretty slow.
Yeah.
But at this stage now, you know, we're funding millions a month. and we're doing that across more than 100 clients each month. And so I would say we're probably underwriting north of 200 files a month.
Yeah. So these cannabis companies that you've worked with that have been successful, you've probably seen like extreme growth from when they started to work with you to now. Probably makes you really proud because you develop relationships with these people.
I'm proud of them, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This industry, sorry to interrupt you, but I'll just tell you, this industry, with all the headwinds that we deal with, from the obvious, 280E and the lack of interstate commerce and our inability to market freely, delinquent accounts receivable, and the failure rate is incredibly low. And the talk, as I was entering the space, everybody told me I was crazy because there's going to be the phrase was a catastrophic event of failure.
Wow.
And that has not happened, despite all of the things that we just talked about. And so I am proud of the growth and the ability for our clients to not only survive, but thrive.
Right. And your clients who are thriving, is there something they all have in common? Is it?
So what I would tell you from my perspective, and it's a limited perspective, but they all have clear goals and objectives. They're not just winging it.
Right.
So they have, at least in their head, but a lot of them write it down too, they have a plan. This is what they're trying to achieve, especially if they're coming to Fund Canna to borrow. This is how we intend to use the money. Even if it's just as simple as we're buying inventory, we believe our margins will look like X, our cost of capital is Y with us. And so they have a plan.
Right.
And without a plan, when someone's like, oh, I just want money, that's not a great use of capital.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And in that case, maybe the money would be expensive.
Right.
But when someone has a specific use case, add lights in a grow facility, I'll give you an example of one that I'm very proud of. Client in California, vertically integrated, and they have a very large indoor and hoop house grow facility, and then they have retail locations. They wanted to expand their indoor grow and add a bunch of lights, and they needed $1.5 million to do that.
Wow.
And in order for them to finance that themselves out of cash flow, it would have taken them about 2 years.
Yeah.
We funded everything, and they added the lights, and their revenue since we funded them has doubled.
Wow.
And their profit, they went from being slightly negative to making over $8 million of profit. And their words, like, we couldn't have done it without the money we got from you.
Yeah.
But they did it. All I did, they knew what to do, right? It's not like I can't take any credit. All I did was unlock the business that was stuck,
right,
just by giving it money. But to me, I'm very proud of the fact that, I would say I want to partner with this industry because I believe in what this industry is.
Yeah.
And I think that it has some of the most resourceful business operators that I've seen in any industry, and I've worked with every industry, right, across the 14 years that I did non-cannabis.
Right.
I mean, you name it, we funded it, and the operators are wildly impressive here.
Yeah. How do cannabis professionals compare to professionals in other industries?
So this is the thing, they're not that different. They really aren't. What I would say is many of us, we take ourselves a little less seriously.
Right.
But we do not take business any less seriously.
Totally.
Right? And by that, I think there's a little less ego in this industry, and that's something every industry could benefit from.
Right.
But otherwise, it's not that different. I mean, like I say, we have a little bit more fun, but not at the cost of business.
Right.
And I respect that a lot.
Yeah, last night was my first night. This is my first. I've only been working in cannabis for 4 months now, and I thought MJ Biz would just be a bunch of stoned people, but people like to party and network, and they get after it. And like you said, they're serious about their business.
So what I'll tell you is, I would say about 15% of our clients don't even use cannabis on a regular basis. They use it, but they're not daily users, maybe not even weekly users.
Right.
They're in the industry because they believe in the industry and it's a business for them.
Right.
But they like the product,
Right.
but it's not their life. It's part of their life.
Yeah.
And so when you walk around this industry, a conference like this, you run into all types.
Yeah.
So, but like I don't come from this industry.
Right.
And while I like the product, I don't use the product every day. I don't wake up and use the product.
Right.
I want to be sharp. I have a job to do. I've got objectives. For me, I don't do well. I use CBD.
Yeah.
I exercise a lot, so it helps me with inflammation and the like. But we have goals and objectives like any other industry, and I think when you meet people like this, I would tell you, like, we hosted a dinner last night of 75 businesses, where we invited 75 operators, and people weren't vaping at the table. That we were all talking about the industry, what's going on with the new administration, and what some of the rescheduling looks like, and where we are, and there was a lot of real dialogue taking place. Some of the inefficiencies that some of the guys that are in the Pacific Northwest were talking about, some of the banking concerns they've got in Oregon, right? Colorado guys were talking about price compression, and no different than any other industry, man.
Right.
And I love it.
Yeah.
I really do.
And what's cool about cannabis is it is net positive for the world. Like, it helps way more people than it hurts. I don't think it really hurts anyone, you know? And that's what's, because a lot of industries, I also work in reality television, and I could say I think the world would be just fine without reality television.
Yeah, we'd probably be, I mean, no offense, but maybe better off, right? I don't want to offend anyone, but they can remain nameless, but there's one family in particular that I think has ruined a lot of things in this world.
Agreed.
But yeah, no, I think cannabis, we employ a lot of people. There's a lot of tax revenue that comes out of this that helps, infrastructure and schools and, you name it.
Yeah.
And so between employment and contribution, and then the plant itself, both as medicine and just recreationally, when used responsibly, it's amazing. It's certainly a lot better than tobacco, alcohol, and any other vice.
Anything, exactly.
And so, for that reason, I'm a believer in the people. I'm a believer in the industry, and I love that we're able to support.
That's amazing. And the last question I got for you, thanks so much for talking to me. I could talk to you all day. Have you worked, what's your experience working with rebates? Do any of your clients, have they gotten rebates? Have they worked with green rebates?
So it comes up, I can tell you, I'm not very familiar, but I can tell you it's come up a lot. And you guys, it's everywhere. And in that regard, I think it's these programs that kind of create loyalty and bind people to each other, and it's awesome. So do we work directly? We're not working directly, but maybe we can change that.
Yeah, let's do that.
But it comes up quite often.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, keep doing what you're doing, man. The cannabis industry is better because you're in it. So
thank you.
Keep doing your thing, and it was great chatting with you,
we're happy
brother.
to be here. Thank you very much.
Man, Adam.
Thanks.